Ready to find your flow? AFSA's got you covered.
That's right. The hands-on training lab in Richardson, Texas is where you trade PowerPoints for pipe wrenches. Real tools, real systems, and real experience you can actually use.
And if you're ready to test your skills, check out the hands-on NFPA 25 workshops, where you'll inspect, test, and maintain live sprinkler systems and fire pumps. No simulations, no fluff, just pressure, flow, and know-how.
It's the perfect way to get under pressure without cracking under it.
So get fired up and register today at firesprinkler.org. Spots fill faster than a charged branch line.
AFSA, where you don't just learn the code, you live it. Welcome to the K-Factor podcast, where we turn up the heat on all things fire protection. Brought to you by the American Fire Sprinkler Association, this podcast sparks conversations about the latest technology, trends, and tools shaping the industry. Join the AFSA tech team as we fan the flames of innovation in fire safety.
All right, welcome to the K-Factor, first recording of the American Fire Sprinkler Association Tech Talk. We're here with Bob Caputo, our president, and Nate's behind the controls of this podcast. So, Bob, thank you for sitting with us today.
Thank you, Josh.
And I appreciate your time. So, the way that we did this is we kind of picked a topic, and we're just going to have a discussion on that topic. The topic being training. And being the first podcast, I think it's important for people to understand kind of where AFSA has been, how it came up, and in regards to training as well, where it's going. So where do you remember your time, or where you started with AFSA and kind of that path?
So first, let me say the AFSA was founded in 1981, and its sole purpose in the founding, it really started out with the open shop movement of fire sprinkler contractors getting into the marketplace in terms of new construction. Our industry has kind of shifted a lot more toward inspection testing, maintenance, and recurring revenue streams, but I'll get back to that in a bit. So in 1981, a group of open shop contractors were not able to find training programs for their fitters. The installation was kind of taught hand to mouth. You know, Charlie told Billy, and Billy told Chuck, and Chuck told Jeff, and by the time Jeff was doing the work, he was doing it less than an exemplary manner. So the contractors got together and decided, hey, we need a training program. At the time, back in the early 80s, the only association that existed in the fire sprinkler world was called NAS and FCA, the National Association of Fire Sprinkler Contractors, morphed into NFSA. They are predominantly, not solely today, but predominantly at the time, they represented union contractors and were the bargaining agent between the various unions, autonomous locals, and Local 669. And they would negotiate pay rates and conditions and issues for the signatory contractor members. Because of that relationship, NFSA was unwilling to provide training to open shop contractors. It would upset the apple cart on the labor side of the equation. Having been denied any training materials for fitters in that young 80s period, they went to Canada and met with a Canadian Fire Sprinkler Association who had an apprenticeship program. And I don't know if they bought it or they borrowed it or they plagiarized it one way or another. They took that and put together a committee, reformatted some things to be more directly relatable, and they sent it to the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor, and got it approved as an apprenticeship program. That's the origin of AFSA, and frankly, the mission still today of AFSA is to provide education and training for the merit shop fire sprinkler contractor. That is literally the mission of this association and continues to be just that.
So when did you notice in your career that training was so important?
And that's a great question. I'll share a personal story. When I got out of the Navy, I went to work for a local fire sprinkler contractor. Lyle Hall was a fellow worker there, a little more senior and experienced. So was Scott Harrison, who recently retired from selling or representing CPVC. So we had a lot of different people there. We had some big projects. And Lyle and I basically noticed that, we kind of needed to get a little more training going. I had been doing fire sprinkler work in the Navy, but they were deluge systems on board ships. So we went to one of the two owners of the company, basically said, hey, we need to kind of hold a Saturday school and get these guys trained up a little better. And his response was really negative. He said, we train them and they just leave us for $1 and a truck, which is a term I've used for my entire 47-year career. But so he basically said, I'm not going to waste my money training these guys. And my response at the time was, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? This is serious life safety, huge liability. He really wasn't interested. He couldn't see the long range need for training. So that was the reason I left the company. I went to Automatic Sprinkler Corporation of America, did their design school up in Ohio, moved my family to Kansas City. I'd actually never been to Kansas City, but I interviewed in St. Paul or Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And the contractor who I interviewed with told me one of their benefits was they usually have the parking lot plowed by 7 a.m. Kansas City's weather seemed a little better. The barbecue was awesome. Packed up my wife and 2 kids, put everything we had in a Ryder truck and made the trek from San Diego to Kansas City. Spent 6 years there and had a lot of opportunities for growth and advancement, but have always been personally tied to the need for training. And when I moved back to Kansas City, I'm from Kansas City, to the San Diego area, I started an office for a bigger company. Ultimately, when the owner retired, I bought that office out, took it non-union, got very involved with AFSA, was the president of the Southern California chapter, really got involved in training personally in that time frame. And now I'm talking late 80s, early 90s. So in the Los Angeles area, there were a growing number of companies doing sprinkler work. Those companies were indulged in a practice of bringing student visa people and having them literally living on the job site, doing the work, and they were undercutting prices drastically. In Los Angeles market, the unions were fighting these companies, filing lawsuits, and I'm a free enterprise guy, so they have a right to work, they have a right to participate in the market. But what we did in San Diego was we decided, let's put on a first Thursday of the month training for all the plan reviewers and inspectors of the municipal fire departments. So we would do that for 4 hours every first Thursday. We did it at different fire department classrooms. It was free for participation. What we tried to do through education was to push out those low-baller contractors who weren't really following codes and standards appropriately by educating the people who were reviewing the plans and inspecting the projects. That was a more successful pathway. We were able to maintain a level of standard of care, getting things done more by the book. That isn't to say that honest contractors don't make honest mistakes. Obviously, they do. But we were able to kind of chase off those interested in just getting a certificate of occupancy and a paycheck and not necessarily doing the job right. So I don't mean to just color the entirety of contractors who might have one origin or another. It was a trend at the time, and it was pretty easy to point a finger and say, those people are ruining our marketplace. And if they would do the work right, their prices would be higher. So obviously today, people are more following the rules, and there are very good contractors. They've learned to do things right and have gotten much better and are now probably some of the better contractors you'd find in Southern California. But that said, the fact that I was doing the training, leading the training, Russ Levitt and I really headed that up. During that time frame, and I'm going to guess it was probably around 1990-ish, the guy who was doing most of the training for AFSA, meaning on the road seminars, his name was Ed Smith, and he had passed away. Lloyd Ivy, who was the director of membership for AFSA at the time, came to San Diego, asked if he could sit through one of my classes, which he did. When it was done, he asked if I would be interested in teaching seminars for AFSA. So my first answer was, well, if Russ will do it, I'll do it. And so, frankly, Lloyd sent us a box of what we called overhead transparencies. You're probably too young, Josh, to know.
I remember those.
You do?
I do, yeah.
So we had these
for the first 5 years of my life.
Overhead projectors, and you'd put these transparencies. Well, Russ and I sat in my office, and we went through that banker's box full of transparencies, looked at each other, took them to the dumpster, threw them in the dumpster. Our first class was up in New York, upstate New York. I'm going to say around Albany. It probably was Albany. And we just had the book in our hand and a flip chart. And we just opened the book, page 3, and started talking, It was fairly successful. At the time, I was guilty of probably telling too many off-color jokes that were inappropriate for any trainer. I have reverted to dad jokes now. But, we were trying to be educational and entertaining at the same time. We started doing programs for AFSA. For about 3 years, we did the flip chart open book, and eventually we glammed onto PowerPoint, put all of our stuff into PowerPoint, started developing more stuff. And then we broadened the instructor cadre when Ken Wagner and Steve Scandaliato joined Russ and I. And frankly, that morphed into teaching for NFPA and eventually at the National Fire Academy in Maryland. So I guess training and education is something I truly, truly value above all else. I'm fond of saying that, doctors get to bury their mistakes, but ours come bubbling back up in the form of lawsuits when systems either don't function properly and there's a loss, whether it's a loss of property, loss of business, continuity, or even, God forbid, loss of life. Those situations are, untenable and probably getting better and better through better fire protection. But I guess I'm fond of saying that firefighting begins at the plan check table, not when the bell rings at the fire station. And so, we need to protect people in the built environment. And so education is key. And that's one of the reasons I jumped at the opportunity to accept my current role as president of this association, because it's the thing that drives me the most is training and education.
So I can't glance over the fact that you said Kansas City has good barbecue. I
didn't say that. I said Kansas City has great barbecue, probably the best barbecue anywhere on the planet.
So if you had to rank 3 places for barbecue.
You mean cities?
Just cities, locations, regions.
Well, Texas has really great barbecue, but I like stuff a little spicier. People talk about barbecue. To me, smoked meat is smoked meat. It's not barbecue till you sauce it. So if I like the sauce and it's been smoked properly, then I'm aboard. Kansas City's unique because they'll barbecue anything that walked. They'll. I mean, you can barbecue chickens and turkeys, and burnt-ends are awesome, and they just anything you want you'll find in Kansas City. But honestly, most of the best barbecue places that I have found anywhere have been old gas stations, and I'm not looking for white linens. I'm looking for great flavor, great sauce. Great cornbread, So Memphis is really cool. St. Louis is pretty good. Texas is a big mix. There's some places in Texas I'd rather go get a hot dog at Costco. But there's some really great places here. And, I always tell the students when they come here for training where I think the best barbecue places are. Yesterday, one of the students in our advanced design school came up to me and said, "You were right, man. That place was just awesome. Thanks for sending me there."
What, in your opinion, makes an effective training?
Well, it's interesting you'd ask that. What's interesting to me, and I have taught seminars in multiple countries and every state in the union, when I leave from a seminar, I still know everything I know. What makes a great seminar is imparting the wisdom and the knowledge and the navigational skills of codes and standards to the participants who've come to the program. It's not about what I know when we leave. It's about what they know when I leave, or when any instructor leaves after the program, or when they leave from our facility here. So, one of the things I've learned here at the AFSA facility, training facility, is kind of funny. The programs have great structure and amazingly good information. But there's only so much you can put in somebody's head in an 8-hour day. It's like dripping water on a sponge. Eventually, it just starts dripping away. So we still have to be a little entertaining. But I've also learned if the food's good at lunch, the students, participants tend to think the course was better. So I think that's kind of a funny thing. What that tells me isn't about the food. What that tells me is the overall experience, not just what the material was or the classroom experience, or whether the instructor was more monotone or more energetic. We're fortunate to have great instructors here at AFSA, and every one of them can hold an audience. I do think there's shifting dynamics in regard to age groups. I do think that the younger the crowd, the less attention span. It's just part and parcel of the use of electronics, right? So the younger generation is used to jumping on a YouTube video and, okay, here's how I have to trim this valve. I'll equate it to, they don't read the whole book. They read the part they need today. And so when you have a 3-day course, it really has to be hands-on, interactive, very physically active. And so that's why we built our lab. And whether you're here for a design school, an ITM class, or a fire pump class, you're going to get that tactile experience. You're not just going to be lectured to. We include them. We pull them into, okay, now you tell us, right? So the training methodology has changed in my lifetime. It used to be people showed up and you gave them a lecture, and very lecture-based, one-way communication. Maybe you ask a few questions to see if people were awake or not. I have an acquaintance in our industry who takes pictures of people who fall asleep in his class, and he kind of puts them humorously on a wall of shame, and it's pretty funny. But I couldn't do that, and the reason I couldn't do that is I've never had anybody fall asleep in one of my classes. I've had one or two, but not enough to make a wall out of. You know what I'm saying? So for me. And I'm not being boastful about this, because it's the same for every one of our instructors. I think we're just dynamic in our approach. I think we're a blended group of people who bring all of our ideas to the table, but we also want to grab the ideas from those participants so that we're constantly evolving and getting better and being better at the delivery, so that when they leave here or when we leave a site, we've left a mark, a true mark, that we're creating people who are better at designing or installing or inspecting fixed fire suppression and fire protection systems.
Which topic is your favorite to teach? If you had to pick one.
All the ones that have something called NFPA on them.
Oh, that narrows it down.
Yeah, so I prefer the water-based standards. I like to teach hydraulics. I do teach NFPA 72 occasionally, but I've never been a practitioner, so I don't think I'm as good instructor on things I haven't physically done myself. I know fire alarms, and I know how to read, but I think I enjoy the special hazard stuff. That's kind of where I cut my teeth with Automatic of America back in the day. But more importantly, when somebody offers me an opportunity to present something and I'm not comfortable with it or feel inadequate, I reject the opportunity, right? I don't want to just stand up there and read from slides and go through the motions. So if we wanted to do that, we just mail the participants the material and tell them to read it.
Just read it to them.
Yeah.
What's one of your go-to dad jokes to keep people entertained in your training?
I'm not sure I want to put this on tape, but it was a favorite joke of my kids when they were young. I would tell them this story about these two Russians that came to New York for the first time. and they're wandering around marveling at these huge buildings and all the people. And all of a sudden they see a Sabret hot dog stand, and the one Russian turns to his buddy and says, "Yuri, they eat dogs in America?" And his buddy, Sergei, says, "Well, we are in America. We too shall eat a dog." So they go over to the vendor and they get a couple of hot dogs, sit down on the bench. First guy opens the wrapper and he looks inside the bun and turns to his buddy and says, "What part did you get?"
It's one of the first ones I remember, Tim, when I took a class with you. So that's one that hits home. Where do you see training, you said, it's changed in your career?
Yes.
10, 15, 20 years from now, fire protection or water-based training, hands-on training, where do you see it going? What do you think?
Well, here in the current age, we hear a lot about AI and how it might or might not affect our futures across the board. Forget about fire protection or training. I think that's a double-edged sword, and I don't think anybody truly knows what AI is going to do for us. I do think it'll be impactful. But when I look at Wikipedia, for example, I'll use this as my primary example to say anyone can go into Wikipedia and change the alleged factual data so that when someone comes along and reads that and accepts it as truth, it might not be. So with computers, we've always said garbage in equals garbage out. AI is basically computer learning and the advancement of the computer. So if I load everything for NFPA 13 into a computer, is it going to be able to design a fire sprinkler system? Some people think yes, I think no. I think it's critical that people review the data that comes out of AI before it gets implemented into a system or into a building or construction, whatever it happens to be. What's changed and changing is every bit of technology. You know, look at your cell phone. You look at an iPhone 16, it has more brain capacity than NASA had available for the computers that let us put a man on the moon. And they work as a GPS and they work as a phone. I mean, it's an incredible little piece of computer. The more advancement that we see in technology, the more likely it is to impact the way we present material. I think COVID taught us that we could do more distance learning through whether it's Teams or other, relatable distance learning computer, watch me on a screen. During COVID, I had the opportunity to present some stuff in the Middle East, and I'm looking at these 30 people-ish, I don't know, in a room on my computer screen, and I can't tell who's following and who's not following. Are they on their phone? Are they on their computer? Are they looking at email? So I don't think that everything can be as effective in distance learning opportunities using Zoom and these other programs. I do think that pendulum will swing back to in-person training, live audience, live instructor. I think that's the best. And until we stop being human beings, I don't see how that's going to change. There are people who can work remotely effectively. There are people who can work remotely. So as technology changes, as typical norms in our societal norms change, I think you'll see a wide variety, not only of learning opportunities, teaching opportunities, but work opportunities. I'm almost 69 years old and I hate remote work. It's something that I just would rather not deal with, but it's a reality of the times, of social norms, of societal norms. And so I kind of tolerate some of it, but I'm never going to like it. I'm the old guy who wants to get up from my desk and walk into your office and ask you a question, see the look on your face where your eyes are rolling up inside your head and all those. I want a conversation. I don't want people to agree with me. I want people to fight with me and argue with me and come to a conclusion when we leave the room as one band, one sound. I think that's critically important. Dictatorial management as opposed to leadership worked in the 60s. It doesn't work in the current millennia. So,
and that same concept in training when we're teaching helps out a lot as well. Yeah. and you have that discussion and actually try to tie it back. So you've been a big advocate. I know the podcast has been a wish list item, I think, since I started. One of the first meetings I saw that. Also with the hands-on lab. Why are these new adventures or new ventures so important to training and what you're trying to do here at AFSA?
The lab was a no-brainer. This is a tactile industry. You can't tell people grooved coupling or young designers going to come in. In fact, I had a young designer ask me literally in the last 24 hours, how do I know whether I should use a flanged fitting, a screwed or threaded fitting, or grooved fitting? And what's the difference and why would I use one or the other? And my first answer was, well, from a practical perspective, you should ask the people installing the system. So go to your superintendent who represents all the foremen and say, how would you like this? But there's a lot of different options. Pro press, mechanical tees, welded outlets, and they all have a reason and they all have a cost. And the more you know, and the longer you've been around, you start to absorb and understand why you would choose one type of fitting over another, one type of pipe over another. But in the end, it comes down to, was there a project specification? Was there some restriction by a local jurisdiction about what you could or couldn't use in product? But more importantly, if those things don't exist, the next thing is, what's the owner buying? And what does your installation team want to see? How and why? When it doesn't matter, well, wait a minute. It always matters. The life of the system, the productivity of labor, all these things matter. So to get everyone in the lab, whether they're designers, whether they're installers, we have an extensive apprenticeship program. And we started the VIP, which stands for Virtual Classroom Instruction Program. The DOL program that we have, which we don't offer a program, we offer a curriculum. It requires some classroom time and some OJT. We introduced that so that the contractors can have their apprentices participate in our virtual training classroom program. For $250 a month, we have incredible trainers that do 2-hour presentations twice a day, 2 days a month. So if you're not able to get to a training site, whether it's traffic or distance, you're in what some people call the flyover states, and maybe you're a smaller company that has 1 or 2 registered apprentices, and you really don't have the cost structure to have somebody doing some classroom time with those 2 people. We offer the opportunity to provide those training, that classroom piece. We can't do the OJT piece. But it's impossible to train people from a book. This is a business that requires hands-on touch, feel to really understand. And I'll use our fire pump training program that you teach as the best example. We can tell people how to test a fire pump, but until they're getting wet and hearing that motor or that engine and seeing how to either do things with a hose monster or with a pitot or whatever piece of equipment you're using to flow that hydrant and achieve those flows. And more than that, we're teaching them how to evaluate the pump test results and what corrective actions might need to be taken based on the evaluation. It's not just, let me record these 3 the flows and the pressures and the volts and the amps and, for those 3 points or 5 points, we're actually teaching them the meaning of that. So if you ask me the time I tell you how to build a clock, we're here teaching people how to build a clock. I think that cannot be done without a lab. You can talk to people till they're blue in the face, but the light switches don't come on until they get out in the field and see it, feel it, and touch it. Well, they get to do that here. In fact, we encourage them, come here and break it. We'll fix it. In fact, we'll make you fix it. The reality of all of that is it gets real. It's not theoretical. So I think that's critically important. And for that reason, it was critically important for me to ask our board of directors for permission to build that lab, move our facility to someplace where we could have an effective lab. And I'll tell you, it didn't take any arm twisting. They were bought in from the first request. I mean, it was no question about it. I forget the second half of your question.
The podcast. You were an advocate for that, and we made this work in a month or so. It's just quick moving.
Well, I'm going to be honest. When you pounded me about doing the podcast and building a podcast room and buying some soundproofing and a few mics and all that, I really thought, we're going to see that like in the first or second quarter next year. I didn't expect 20 minutes later we're going to have a fully functional sound room with mics and you forcing me to be interviewed early this morning.
I moved quickly. I'm sorry.
But the one thing that drove my not just acceptance, but wrapping my arms around this project is simply that communication is a key to everything. It's the key to conflict resolution. It's the key to getting jobs done. And frankly, if we're not out there communicating, we're not going to attract the youth of America to this industry. We have to be participatory in all things social media. And this is one step toward that. It requires many. But frankly, Josh, your enthusiasm for doing this and the process that you've gone through to find a name and and to have all of the pieces of this come together is just really, really exciting. And it's an extension of our core values and our core beliefs. It's just one more piece of the puzzle. And what makes me so happy to be sitting here in this room and looking at this and listening to this and participating in this is the fact that your energy toward building this and developing this is proof to me of our staff all buying into what needs to be done collectively, that it's not me dictating things, that it's you guys jumping in and understanding what the industry needs and what our world needs to continue to be protected from fire, the ravages of fire in the built environment. This is just one more way to get the word out there by boring people to death listening to my voice.
So a lot of contractors, if you think about your smaller mom and pop shops, they typically have one or two, maybe three experienced people. And one thing that we've talked about is just the workforce dwindling and not having the people to come in. I feel like there's a confidence to teaching people and training people. What would you have to say, or how do you harvest that from your experienced workers to get the younger people trained up?
So for starters, let me just say, it drives me a little crazy that there are, you refer to them as mom and pops, but I'll call them smaller contractors. Maybe they're doing $3 million and less a year in volume. And they're not members of AFSA or even NFPA. It absolutely drives me crazy. The price of admission at the lowest levels is like $1,200, $1,400 a year. And you can pay that $100 a month on a credit card. We offer so much, especially in the technical services group, that we've had contractors call us and say, you helped us solve a problem by helping us fight the issues with our local AHJ, and we saved $30,000 in potential added cost to our project. But more often I hear $3,000, $4,000, $6,000. You just paid our membership for the rest of my life, kind of an approach. When I hear the smaller contractors say, well, I really can't afford to be a member, it just blows my mind. So from a membership perspective, I don't see how you can afford not to be a member of your trade association. But from the perspective I'll just say that when you talk about reaching the youth of America, this industry has been predominantly nepotistic in how we bring people in. I'm a classic example. My father worked for ADT back in the 60s, left them and went into land development. But I I really wasn't knowledgeable of what ADT did or didn't do. I learned about fire sprinklers when I was in the military. When I got out, I was actually going to go to law school, but I didn't. I was raising a family, found a job in fire protection, and I have 4 adult children. 3 of them are in fire protection. Back to the nepotistic thing. My brother is a fire sprinkler contractor in Vista, California. Some of his kids were involved. So that worked for us. When you talk to people about how they got into this industry, my father was in it, my uncle was in it, my neighbor down the street was in it, and he got me involved. That isn't sustaining our industry any longer. Construction in general isn't attracting enough people to the trades. But the ones that are attracted to the trades know about electricity. They know about HVAC. They know about plumbing and carpentry. Who knows about fire protection? Most people I talked to didn't even know that was a thing. I've been in buildings to do inspections on fire sprinkler systems where the owner looks at me and says, "We have fire sprinklers?" Yeah, look up, man. But at the end of the day, our industry is growing. There's a lot of interest from Wall Street money. There's been a lot of companies, they're being rolled up, and that's all a positive thing, especially for those folks that have decided to sell their companies and grab onto some wealth, an exit plan. That's all great. But to quote Jim Toms from Telgen Corporation, the 4 major universities, that offer a degree in fire protection, collectively, they're only graduating about 100 students a year, and we have more than 100 people a year retiring from the industry. It's the same for fitters. It's the same for inspectors. We have to find a way, and initially I thought that was get out to the high schools. Let's take our fitter books. There are 4 of them, and let's take book 1 and send it out to these high schools so that the kids that are in high school can see this is another choice. Then I learned through a number of different sources and research that you got to get them when they're in the 2nd grade. You got to get them in elementary school. And that's why I encourage you to develop that children's book that you've developed. And as soon as you get a copy written, we can blast it out there to the youth of America. We have to make sure that the public knows what fire sprinklers are, and extend that to let them know what career opportunities there are, not just in fire sprinklers, but fire alarms and fire protection engineering and the gamut of fire and life safety, whether they go to a fire department or to a private agency or to a sprinkler company or an alarm company. I'm fine recruiting for all of that, but I do think we as an association have to be involved in public awareness, public education, and recruiting efforts to see our industry's coffers filled with people who can continue to support the growth of the industry. So getting out to elementary schools, high schools, trade schools, that it's more normal now for people wanting to go into a trade than wanting to do a 4-year college program. That pendulum's kind of swung back. You think about graduating college with $80,000 worth of debt or $100,000 worth of debt versus going into a trade after a 4-year apprenticeship or a 6-year apprenticeship. You'd be making $80,000 or $90,000 a year. And frankly, our industry is kind of bulletproof. During COVID, we were declared to be an essential service. So I don't know of anybody who wasn't working in our industry during COVID. If we survived COVID, we've survived all these ebbs and flows of economy, a pandemic. What's going to kill the fire protection industry? Nothing. Unless we find a way to shoot ourselves in the foot. This is a great industry, and people need to know that. Look at me. I'm not the brightest guy in the room, and I've had a great career. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, even if we go to Mars, you just change a few numbers, and fire protection's still a thing.
Yeah, I don't know if they on Mars and other planets if they actually use a metric system, but I'm guessing.
We'll see.
Because we're still using a system that was invented by the Brits, the imperial system of measurement that they don't even use anymore.
So what would you tell that experienced person at your shop, if you're a contractor, that you're trying to get to properly train some of the younger generation? Because that's a hard jump. I feel like it's a confidence.
That's a great question. I'm going to share a personal story that was it's absolutely not embellished. When I went to East Coast Fire and they became Fire and Life Safety America, we developed a training program for inspectors, right? And it was designed to be a 2-year program that had classroom time once a quarter for a week, sandwiched with OJT. So we were training these inspectors, and they would go out for their OJT, and with the next training session, classroom session, they would report to us that, well, I'm working with Billy, and Billy says that's not the way we really do it. Forget what you learn in the class. Here's how we do it in real life. Well, that's just creating liabilities. So we learned that we had to pull the legacy inspectors in and train them up so that they were doing it right. It was bizarre to learn that the new people that we were training who had no experience whatsoever knew the right thing to do, and the guys that we had out in the field for years were doing it wrong, which equaled liability. I mean, amazing liability. So we had to correct that problem. The reality is companies have to be committed to training. I mean, they can't keep swapping people. I'll give you $1 if you come to work for me. You don't know enough, but you know more than somebody else. So these companies that keep, they call it poaching people from one company to another. What ends up happening is you are overpaying for mediocre labor or less than mediocre labor. We have to invest in training and education if we want to sustain our industry. And so that quote unquote poaching thing, it doesn't work long term. It's a short term solution with a very bad ending. So have I successfully avoided that question?
I think so.
Okay, good.
So I think kind of our last question, kind of tie this podcast up. There is a gap in getting newer people into the industry. However, if you go into our design trainings and some of our trainings, we're seeing a lot of green people, which is great.
They're from Mars, the green people?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. kind of short, have a little pew gun, and off they go. But a lot of times they leave here and they're always, what can I do more to better myself? Or there's people who don't get access to our trainings that are always looking to do something to get. I mean, as a mentor, I kind of look in your path, and that's what guides me. But they're looking to get to that stage or be successful in their company. What information or what thoughts do you have for them to progress and do it the right way?
I'm going to divide my answer into two things. One of the things that I've implemented, and I should say we've implemented, because it certainly isn't just me, is for the lower tier contractor members, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, we have a scholarship program for design school. Hey, I can't afford to have my guy gone for a week and pay for this design school. We'll help you with that. We know that need is there, and I'm not going to offer those scholarships to the higher end companies who can't afford it, but we're going to offer that for the lower volume companies that need some help, but still need the training probably more than anyone. We do see people, they've gone through an early program, beg us to come back for the other one. Hey, my boss isn't going to pay for this. Is there any way I can? And so we try to find pathways to help people do that. But at the end of the day, I think it doesn't matter the industry. We look for attitudes and aptitudes, people that are willing and wanting to learn, people who are running toward us and not away from us. Those are the folks that we want to hire, and those are the folks that the companies that are out there doing this work should be wanting to hire. We have people who show up and have a hunger for knowledge. We can provide the education and training collectively, and they can go get this on-the-job training and input from their folks back in their offices that just enhances that. So it's a team effort. It's a multi-pronged effort toward a common good and a common goal, and that is well-trained people designing, installing, and inspecting and testing our systems. It's amazing to me. If I looked at my own career, I was always the guy willing to stay late and not get paid for it. I mean, literally, and I don't mean to turn this into hey, I'm a great guy. That's not the case. and by the way, if you talk to my wife, I'm sure you get a different answer. But, you know, if somebody needed to plunge a toilet, I grabbed the plunger. True story. I once mowed the lawn at a company I worked at because it needed to be mowed. Okay. I'm the guy who's willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish the common goal. And I don't have my hand out every single time. And I've never had to do that. I've always been fortunate enough to work in companies that paid for the successes and could see the opportunities. And frankly, that fed my needs. The harder I worked, the luckier I got, the better pay raises I got. It's never, I guess, Josh, I'm not really motivated by money, but I'm really motivated by a lack of money. This industry has provided an opportunity to raise my family and have a decent life. I'm not a rich guy, but I've never wanted for anything. This industry has provided all of that. All I had to do was show up early, stay a little late, and be willing to learn and be willing to try things and be willing to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. There's nothing spectacular about that. It's about the right attitude. It's about having an aptitude. You can have a wonderful career in this industry, make serious money, raise a family, own a home. All of those things are available. We just need the folks, bring them here. We'll train them up and encourage them. And if we can't encourage them, pat them on the back, we'll kick them in the butt, feed them and send them back to your companies with a better ability to help you make money, which is the lifeblood of any company. We'll send them back more capable of doing that than when they got here.
Well, this is exactly what I was hoping for in the podcast is kind of an insight when we've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of people, gather some insight just in conversation. So really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and break it to you that you're probably on the docket anytime we need to get someone in here, because I'm looking forward to learning more.
Fair enough. As long as you follow the one rule. What was the one thing I told you? I would sit down for this as long as what?
As long as it wasn't scripted.
As long as it wasn't scripted. I don't want to see the questions in advance. I think it needs to be genuine. The ahs and the uhs and the breaks. I'm sure you're going to edit some of this stuff out. Probably the Russian joke for sure. But at the end of the day, I think the reality is I hate those interviews where somebody wants to give me the questions in advance. I just don't think that's genuine. And I think we need to be as genuine as possible.
Sounds good.
So thank you for inviting me. Appreciate your time.
You know what? I'm going to be genuine real quick. I'm going to go back to something we talked about. Barbecue is good barbecue if you don't have to put sauce on it.
No, that's just smoked meat.
No, that's Texas barbecue.
Nate's a
Are
Texan,
you forgetting
that's
that
what we're getting here.
I'm the boss?
I love you too, Bob.
I don't think it's appropriate for an Italian American to be judging barbecue anyway. But it's my second favorite food once you get past the pasta and good sauce.
So is Carolina barbecue?
I don't want to offend all of our members in Carolina, so I'm going to plead the fifth. I am not a fan of vinegar-based barbecue.
Really appreciate your time, Bob. And
Thanks,
we'll wrap this one up.
All right.
Thanks. This has been the K Factor Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share wherever you tune in to podcasts. Or head over to our website for more. Reach out to us anytime at technical@firesprinkler.org. Stay safe and always learn as we keep the fire protection conversation going.